All right. Thank you, Professor Soni, Raj, and Emma for a great first panel discussion. For the next session, please welcome Faye D'Souza, who's a trailblazing journalist and media entrepreneur who's reshaped Indian journalism with her citizen first, no noise approach. Raised in Bangalore, Faye is the youngest woman to have led a national news channel and has won honors like the Red Ink and Vogue Women of the Year awards for her fearless, impactful work. She is also one of Impact's 40 under 40 and listed among one of the most influential women in Indian media and marketing. In 2020, she founded Beatroot News, a youth-focused digital news brand aiming to restore dignity to news by providing non-partisan, respectful, and accessible content for young Indians. And when she's not holding the powerful to account, she's a self-proclaimed tree hugger, reminding us that she's as rooted in nature as she is in the truth. This session will be moderated by our fellow Bangalorean and second-year MBA student, Shreya Jain. Please join me in welcoming Faye and Shreya.
Awesome. Welcome, Faye. Let me start by saying what an incredible honor it is to turn the tables a little bit today and have the chance to interview you. The way that we're going to do this today is for maybe the next 25 minutes, I'll ask you some questions, start with maybe something more personal, then move to the state of media in India, and then maybe end with something related to the theme of the conference today. We leave about 10 to 15 minutes for the audience, who I'm sure are extremely eager to ask you questions as well. So Faye, you've spoken openly about this concept of enough, right? Wrestling with questions like, am I enough? Am I successful enough? Questions that many of us, silently ask ourselves each and every day. From navigating what felt like not being enough to growing a platform today with over millions of followers, what did that journey teach you about success, self-worth, and what really matters? And how did you come to believe that you are, in fact, more than enough?
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you so much to the conference, to Kellogg, to the students for including me. I want to first start off by apologizing for not being with you in person, which was my intention. I'm actually traveling to look after a parent who's ailing. So it's a difficult time, but I'm happy that we were able to carve out this much time and we can still have the conversation that we intended to. So my gratitude to the team for making this conversation possible. I think that, I wanted to share just before we started about, the fact that I'm now in my 40s and I feel old and wise because of it. And I think that life is a series of asking yourself, am I enough? And it's because we exist in so many spaces, right? Am I enough as a professional? Am I enough in terms of ethics? Am I enough as a human being? Am I enough as a daughter, as a parent, as a partner, as a spouse, as an employer, as a colleague? These are all, important things. And I think that's the question we encounter repeatedly through our lives. So I wish someone had told me this when I was in my 20s, is that the thing, especially professionally, and that's what I'd like to focus on in this conversation, the thing that will actually keep you going professionally over the course of your entire career, which is a 30, 40-year marathon, is if you really love the job. And if you really love what you're doing, and you can do it in different ways. And I started off actually, doing my journalism on radio, on All India Radio. And, I've worked in television and I've worked on the internet and I've worked for newspapers, but the journalism is the same. And spaces will change and colleagues will change and sectors will go through, their motions, and there'll be, points where you think, oh my God, we're all going to get fired. And there will be points in your career when you think, oh my God, I'm going to have to fire everybody. But if you really love what you're doing, then you will always be enough. And you should be obsessed with that idea. And when I was really just starting my career, one of my closest friends, who incidentally did an MBA at Kellogg, very wisely said to me that you can never get the same high from the same job every day. But if the good days outnumber the bad days, then you're fine. And I think that that's really important to realize that nothing's going to be perfect at all points, but you have to love what you do and you have to be obsessed with it. And I think that that's when you realize you're enough. And the story that I like to tell is when I left television in 2019, I really didn't know what I was going to do because it was a surprise decision they made for me, to leave. And for a period of time, I went through it. It was a great deal of anxiety because for the first time in my life, I was without employment. I'd never taken a break for 17 years up till then, and suddenly I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I asked myself, do I want to be a journalist? Is there something else I can do? And there are all of these other options available. The truth was, there was nothing else I wanted to do. I wanted to be a different kind of journalist. I wanted to add a different kind of value from my work. But this is what I wanted to do. From the time I was 18, I knew it. And I've been successful. I've had some pretty upsetting, sad days when I've really flunked at everything I've tried. I've launched an app that I may have to shut soon because it's failing. So you fail a lot and there are points of success, but if you really love what you're doing and there's nothing else you'd rather do, then it will work out and you'll realize that you'll be enough at all those, at all those points when you ask yourself that question.
Such incredible advice that I think each of us in the audience, and I wish that this is advice that we got to hear on a daily basis. Let's talk about Beatroot, since you alluded to it. We're sort of, in a moment where digital platforms are completely reshaping how people consume and trust the news, especially the younger audiences. Beatroot, with that, you're trying to do something different, not just in tone, but in structure as well. What made you want to start it? And where do you see it heading in the future? You alluded to something failing, so maybe talk about that a little bit.
So actually, when I left TV, I was part of the toxic culture that was television, which was really, there was an angry sort of way to approach the news all the time. And I'd spent a lot of time, when I realized that I want to continue being a journalist, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what kind of journalism I want to do. And it kept coming back to the word dignity, which is also, in the stated purpose of the company, that we will do the news with a sense of dignity to the journalists who are being employed, to the subject matter that we're dealing with, to the people who are being covered, to the guests we speak to, but most importantly, to the audience who's receiving the news. Because as a journalist, my job is to tell you what has happened. But my job is not to tell you how to feel about what has happened. My job is not to tell you whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, or you should be angry about it, or you should be sad about it, or you should hate so-and-so and blame so-and-so, because as a fully functioning member of a democracy, you choose your government, you can decide for yourself if this is good or bad. I don't have to tell you that. It's not my job. And so we started building this organization under the idea that we will only deal the news with dignity. That means that we will put it out in the most measured and careful, colorless, and that's a very careful word that we use, colorless fashion possible. We will not bring in our own points of view because we each have, all human beings have a bias. So we work very hard to make sure we don't bring in any biases. We work very hard to make sure that we do not bring in opinions unless it's clearly marked as so. And we always apologize when we get something wrong. I personally write out the apology because that is part of the respect and the dignity that we give to our audience. And so that's fundamentally what Beatroot does. It restores, it's an attempt to restore dignity to news across all of the platforms where our audience may exist. So that includes Instagram, it includes YouTube, it includes an app that we use. Wherever you are, we will be. But the fundamentals of how we process the news for you will be with dignity.
And where do you see this kind of heading in the future?
Well, see, I personally believe that there's a longer conversation of why corporate-owned mainstream media is failing in India and maybe in some other parts of the world, but in India particularly. I believe that there are green shoots for news media in India again, because there are a bunch of us who went out on our own and we scrambled and we did the kind of work that people really wanted to watch or read. And we've built audiences right now. And I think that this is where your next media conglomerates are going to come from. But they will have to be built on a sense of trust and a sense of dignity and a sense of purpose. And they have to hold the audience's, best interest at their core. And I find that these independent, including Beatroot, there are many independent news organizations right now who are doing excellent work in India. I see this as the future of journalism. I don't know if it's the future of big media, but it's the future of journalism.
Yeah. So speaking of kind of the job of a journalist, right, in a time of rising polarization, misinformation, or information overload, if you will, how do you as a journalist kind of decide what kind of stories to tell and what stories to not tell? Are there external factors that affect that decision?
Well, actually, it's really interesting. If you walk across your campus and go to the journalism school and sit in the first class, they will answer your question. Journalism is meant to be information that you need to know, not information you want to know, right? There is an obsession in India right now for what someone wore to the airport or to their yoga classes, right? Bollywood photographs, so paparazzi photographs of Bollywood celebrities is actually the most lucrative form of media to put on social media. It does well, people love to see it. And so you'll see mainstream guys do a lot of this because it's cheap to access and it makes a lot of money. That's not journalism because it's not something you need to know. It's something you want to see. So right in there, there's the first filter to how we look at our news. Is this something that you need to know as a member of society, as a functioning member of the democracy? The second filter, which is really important, which I can't believe I have to keep reiterating, is the fact that news has to be fact and not fiction. And a lot of your mainstream television guys seem to have forgotten that. So once you say, okay, this is an interesting story, every sentence has to be put through multiple layers of fact check as a process. So you have to slow the process down and check everything over and over again. And then finally, when you put it out, you have to make sure that you have a system that cuts out bias and cuts out any sort of personal opinion that you may have. And we've actually worked systems that do all of these things. You haven't asked me why I named it Beatroot, but I'll answer anyway. Because the idea was that it's good for you. It's like eating your vegetables, right? So because a lot of the audience that we're talking to, like yourselves, in their 20s, in their 30s, a lot of people find news very distressing and say that, I'm plugging off. I don't want to look at it anymore. It's too much. I'll just, look at pretty photographs of food and outfits on Instagram. But you can't live like that. You cannot be a functioning member of democracy if you are not adequately informed. And if you don't know what you're doing with your vote and you don't know what you're doing with your opinion. So you have to be informed. You have to eat your vegetables every day. It might not be exciting, but it needs to happen. And so that was the point behind naming it Beatroot. That it's grounded, it's rooted, it's close to the truth. Your grandmother insisted that you have your beetroot and now it's in your juices, so it's trendy as well. But fundamentally, we give you news that's good for you. So when you read the news in the manner that we present it to you, which is dignified, it's not triggering, or we try to bring down the level of trigger, you become a better functioning member of society. You can't eat butter chicken every day.
Yeah.
You have to have your vegetables.
Yeah. I personally have not had a lot of beetroot in my life, but I think I should perhaps start.
At least have the news version.
Yeah. Let's talk about the mainstream guys or the butter chicken for a little bit.
All right.
So India's rank in the World Press Freedom Index has consistently been low, right? At least for the last 5 years. And it fell to 159 out of 180 countries last year. Some may argue that, this ranking is exaggerated, misunderstood. Others say it likely reflects a very real deterioration in the state of press freedom in India. Many may also link it to, that growing corporate control of media that you alluded to. What's your take? And, what does that reality on the ground feel like to you in India?
So there are very obviously many layers to this question. Like there's no one answer to anything about India in that manner. So let me break this up. There are journalists in tier 2, tier 3 rural India who get shot for doing their work, who are murdered, who are regularly targeted for doing their work. So there is a real risk in being a journalist in India. The corporate media model is broken. It doesn't work. And I think it doesn't work across the world also, but particularly doesn't work in India. It takes hundreds of crores of rupees to launch and run a television channel, for example. And I've seen the books, I've been there, I know how that works. You need to spend a lot of money on distribution, you need government licensing, which is very difficult to get, you need marketing, there's a cluttered space. And the equipment, uplink, downlink, that sort of stuff, right? You're not making that money because nobody is watching. Nobody has the traditional, I mean, the set-top box television is, nobody's there anymore. Nobody has those connections. So you're spending hundreds of crores of rupees and you're not making anything because the advertiser is now confused about what to do with their money. People used to watch television for live sports, movies, entertainment shows, and news. Live sports, movies, entertainment shows are all on OTT. The news guy is still wondering, what am I still doing here, right? So what happens then is that corporates with the intention of using those news channels as PR agencies for themselves and the governments that they are close to will take over, which we have seen play out. Which is why there's actually no real journalism happening in any of those channels. They're just corporate agencies that do PR and they plug government. And I think the audience realizes that because the audience is just migrated to the internet. But the good news is there are green shoots, like I said, all over the country. I see, I mean, when I go to conferences and I meet other journalists who are working using platforms like YouTube, using platforms like Instagram, you know, there are actual YouTube channels that only cover tribal affairs run by people from the community, that only cover Dalit affairs, that only cover women in Uttar Pradesh, that only cover Coimbatore, they only cover South India, they only cover the east of India. So there's a tapestry of journalists across the country who are putting out relevant work specific within the communities that they serve. So if you pull back and you look at the bigger picture, the work is there, it's getting done. It's just not corporatized, which I think is a good thing. It means that these reporters or these journalists are owing accountability to their audience and their readers and their community. And that community is giving them sustainability. And so it's working from there. I think that over a period of time, there will be some consolidation where people all figure out, we've already banded together, figured out how to share our costs on legal stuff, and we share ideas on tech. And I think that's going to grow going further. So yes, corporate journalism or corporate owned mainstream media is definitely in trouble, whether they want to accept it or not. But I think that there's something very interesting happening on the ground. And in the next 5 years or so, the future will come from the ground, from these organizations.
And I want to talk a little bit about kind of maybe using you as an example, right? Like to so many of us, you've become kind of way more than a successful journalist, right? That person that we see as someone we trust. You know, if Faye has said it, it's a credible voice in this like noisy world that is the news today. What does that kind of influence kind of feel like to you personally? And how do you decide what to actually do with it, right? And this is a question for you, but sort of for everyone within those communities that you described, who people like us are kind of flocking to actually understand what the state of the ground is.
I mean, the influence, like you call it, or the credibility is the most important thing, right? Because that's what runs the business. And I believe that, we're in a space right now where the relationship is audience to individual, not so much audience to brand.
Yeah.
So the audience feels like they know me. They feel like they understand my personality. They understand what I stand for. And so for me on the internet, first and most important thing is authenticity. I think that as soon as you be even slightly off, you're pretending to be something that you're not, the audience can sense it. It's a thing, and they're just like, this doesn't make sense to me anymore. So it's really important to be true to who you are. And there are things that I feel strongly about that translate in stories that we chase, stories that get highlighted, stories that pop up more. So obviously, things like women's rights, LGBTQI rights, mental health, environment, sustainability, climate change, the idea of education, of legal rights, of medical rights and healthcare rights in India. These are the things that drive me, and so that sort of gets reflected in the work that we do. So I think it's really important to be authentic, and then to I keep telling my team this, that you don't. Building credibility is like building a giant wall. You have to do it brick by brick, day by day. So every day you come in and you do your job with diligence and with as much honesty as you can muster. And, over a period of time, when you look up, you've built a wall, but you do it one brick at a time. You lay one brick a day. And that's the relationship, that you have to, that works. So for me, influence that you're talking about, or the relationship that I call it, the relationship I build with the audience, comes from that, from being authentic and keeping credibility at the very heart of what we do.
Right. I absolutely love that.
Hindi has a beautiful word for this, right? Imandari. Yeah. I don't know if there's a literal translation in English for that word, but it's partly honesty, it's partly diligence, it's partly integrity, it's all of these things mixed together. So I love that word. It's a beautiful word.
It is a beautiful word, and for sure something that I think represents a lot of your ethos amongst everyone. Okay, I want to pivot maybe to something that's more, relevant to kind of the theme of our conference, which is India Forward, supercharging global growth in the next decade. Many of us here in the audience are deeply interested in entrepreneurship, envision, returning back to India to start something more meaningful. Recently, there's been sort of considerable amount of discussion about the state of innovation in India. Again, I'd love to hear your take. Even though you just told me journalism is not about opinions, it's about sort of giving away the facts. But what do you think, the state of startups or innovation in India is today? Where do you think we're getting it right? Where do you think we're, possibly missing the mark?
So I think you're reacting to the incident recently where the Commerce Minister made a statement saying Indian startups are just doing dukandari or shopkeeping, and they're just making money and they're not really innovating. There's no deep tech. We're not taking on, see what's happening. He did a direct comparison to what's happening in China. And I found that really interesting because I've been a journalist in India now for over 20 years. And I remember when in UPA 1, UPA 2 governments, we would spend a lot of time, and I worked in CNBC for a really long time. So as business journalists, we spend a lot of time comparing India's GDP, China's GDP. India, China's doing this. India's doing this, China's doing this, right? So we would do a lot of that, and we were in a race with China. And then there was this point where we sort of sat back, and the whole country was saying, China's doing manufacturing, we're doing services. Because the IT sector, IT BPO back office sector has really picked up in India. And they was like, okay, we're doing well. Because we've got the services thing running, we're making, our engineers are making it happen. We speak English, they don't. So it's easier for them to do manufacturing, whereas it's easier for us to do services. And we sort of sat back and felt good about it. I think it's interesting that the Indian startups are largely service sector startups. So your Olas or your Blinkits or your Zeptos or your Quick Commerce, these are all services. They're not technically product in the sense, they're not manufacturing startups, right? So that's what we've done, because maybe that is the foundation that we laid as a country. And I remember back then, anybody else in the audience who's above 40 and feeling wise will remember that for the tech sector, and Bangalore, where both of us are from, it was called the sunrise sector. It had tax breaks. The erstwhile Andhra Pradesh government, the Karnataka government was giving away land at throwaway prices for, these big companies to come and set up their services. So Infosys come here and Google come here and somebody else come here and Satyam back in the day. So the whole idea, there was an environment created for these businesses to do well. And they did well. And we built an entire couple of decades on the back of the IT sector. I find it interesting, the minister now says, hey, why aren't you doing deep tech? The answer is going to be because that environment was not created. because you didn't create the environment for manufacturing in India. There's too much red tape. It's too difficult to set up these businesses. The GST system is very hard. We need too many, permissions to actually do physical manufacturing of anything. We've not, and from large universities like the one that you're in, we know that the real talent that wants to do proper research goes overseas, because that's where the real STEM research happens. We've not actually created an incubator for STEM research that runs into decades, that receives government funding, that receives corporate funding, that goes on for a very long time. So for my takeaway from the fact that the minister has brought this up is, yes, now we can talk about it. Right now, I'm hoping industry will make a representation and say, this is the list of things that we want. Please come and fix these things for us, and we will do deep tech, we will do STEM, we will do manufacturing, because we can do it. It's like it was pointed out in the panel that just ended, it's Indians who are doing it overseas also. All of that innovation is being done by Indians. So we need to create an environment where the Indians can do it in India. And I'm hoping that this window that has been opened by the minister will now lead to conversations that will lead to real action, where people like yourselves can come back to India, to spaces which will encourage you to create, to innovate, to build product, and to build a lot of other things. So I've always believed that creatures evolve in response to their environment. It's a fundamental Darwinian evolution theory. So if you create the environment for that kind of innovation, people will innovate. So here's hoping.
Yeah, here's hoping. And I also love that. I think, to your point, like the first step is having a conversation about it. And a lot of us should be involved in that conversation. So yeah, really appreciate you sharing those thoughts. Faye, I think I can keep asking you a lot of questions, and I know the audience is very eager to ask them as well. Just before we step into audience Q&A, I'm going to ask you like 3 super quick rapid fire questions.
Okay.
We'll go to the audience. Okay, what's one rule in journalism that you live by, no matter what?
Fact, not fiction.
Love it. Your go-to source of news when you're not working?
So actually, I don't trust any one thing. So I read everything. I have all the apps and I've got all the pings, and my phone's just chaos. But that's just the way I like to do it. I don't recommend it though.
Awesome. Okay, a public figure that you'd love to interview, and why?
Like currently living or
Dead or alive?
Dead or alive. Okay, so the person I would have loved to have a conversation with as a journalist is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
Okay.
Because I've always been a huge fan, and I feel like there weren't enough, profile interviews done on him, because everything we know about him, we know from reading what he wrote, but we don't know enough about his personality and what he was like. And was he funny? Was he stern? We don't know anything. So if I had that chance, that's what I would do.
Okay, love that answer. All right, awesome. Okay, so with that, I will end my peppering of questions, and we'll move to the audience for some questions. I'm not actually physically in the room, so...
Hello. Thanks, Faye, for the insightful discussion. I'm Shagun, a student at Kellogg, and also as a student who's studying the application of technologies permeating different industries. I'm very curious how the recent wave of Gen AI affects your industry, journalism. Are you adopting it or mitigating it? What's happening there?
Also, thank you for that. That's a brilliant question. So Gen AI is everywhere. I don't know if any of you follow my Instagram handle. I put out a couple of videos, short videos, 60-second videos every day. They're 100% AI generated, and it's not me at all. We feed it a script, and it throws up a video. So it's making that part of our lives much faster. It's helping a lot with basic desk work, like research, just copy checking, rewriting, things like that. I'm hoping that over a period of time, what this will do is that free up journalists to actually do investigative work and groundwork, which is something AI cannot do. So if The writing and the editing and ting has been handed over to the machine. The real humans need to be on doing real investigative work, and I'm hoping that that happens over a period of time. But as we sit here today, the risk that my sector and perhaps all sectors run is that of fake news or fabricated news from generative AI. There will come a time when everybody in this room is going to be paranoid about the fact that a press release or a video that sounds exactly like you about your business can come out that has nothing to do with what you've put out without your permission. And that is where AI is taking us, and we need to find ways to work on fact checking. We need to, because what's happening right now is that the money that is flowing into generative AI to create the videos, to create a front page of a Washington Post article that looks exactly like the Washington Post for all practical purposes and is completely fabricated, or to create a video that sounds exactly like you. There's a lot of money going in that direction. There's not enough money going into mitigating the problem across the board. And I think that that globally is something that we will all have to look at across all sectors. We're going to have to start funding detection of fake news across the board, across languages, across geographies. It will threaten our elections, it will threaten our democracies, it will threaten the way we do business. And I fear that we're not doing enough in that direction.
Hey, hi Faye, this is Neil here. I'm a recent Kellogg graduate and working in Chicago now. I'm a huge fan, watch a lot of your content. The one thing that I miss when I watch content from you or Barkha or Shekhar Gupta is interviews with top Indian government officials or politicians, right? Which the access of top government ministers, the prime minister is limited very much still to the mainstream media that we all agree peddles a lot of fake news. So how does independent media like yourself solve the problem of access? Because that's what's keeping mainstream media relevant today. In many ways.
Keeping mainstream media relevant though, if you believe that those interviews are friendlies and they're not asking any questions, is that of relevance to you?
That's a great question. I think it shouldn't be, but unfortunately, since that is the only avenue to hear from them in many ways, that's what it becomes like. I still want to hear from my prime minister. I still want to hear from the top ministers. And if that's the only avenue to do that, pretty much, then that's a problem. So how do you incentivize these people to engage with organizations like yourself?
I think that we're living in a sort of different world when it comes to interviews. And it's not just mainstream media, there are also very popular podcasters who now get these interviews as well because they have the reach. The difference is, and this is again not politicians, for example, when Bill Gates comes to India and he speaks on reaching certain people. I think that the space for interviewing, for hard interviews done by journalists is also going through a change. Because now what happens is, on the internet, a guest can also deliver reach and views, and that equals to money. And so between the interviewer and the interviewee, there are a lot of conversations about what questions you can ask and what questions I'm willing to answer and how you will edit it and how I can watch the edit before it goes out and how I have a final say in whether or not this is okay. Now, for a traditional journalist, these are all demands that we simply cannot agree to because that's not the way we do our business. People who don't qualify or don't identify as journalists, who identify as podcasters, who identify as television news entertainers, these people can agree to such demands. So I don't imagine there will come a time when we'll be able to agree to these demands. So I'm not really sure how we can solve for the problem that you have brought forward.
Thanks anyway.
In the interest of time, let's do one last question.
Hi Faye, this is Kinnedy. Thank you for being here. My question is that unfortunately across all generations, a lot of people in India still buy into the PR-driven, the agenda-driven, emotion-driven news. Do you think there's anything we can do to change that mindset at scale?
At scale, I don't know, but I think that it's not just India. I think that across the world, people are buying into fabricated information that then influences elections, that then leads to results, that then perhaps takes us very close to global recessions because of the results that it has led to. It's not an India phenomena. It's happening across the world. It's happening in the country that you're in right now. It's because in the era of social media, punchy, interesting, plausibly true things take precedence over the actual technical truth. I think that the space that I would like to occupy is the center, which is a really tricky space to have. And I think that the way to bring more people on board is to have more organizations that put out the news neither on this side or on that side. And so there's a sense of credibility to the information that you're putting out, and over a period of time, you're able to bring both sides together and say, hey, listen, we're not taking anybody's side here, we're just putting out the information, which means that you can actually have a conversation on this page, which is not hateful, and it's not biased, and it's not partisan. But that, I believe, will have to be the future, because otherwise we're looking at a very grim future for all democracies if we can't have conversations across the aisle, like you said.
Okay, thank you so much.
Faye, it's been an absolute incredible honor to have this chat with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I think everyone in the audience absolutely appreciates you, your time, your insights. Hopefully your parent feels better. And thank you for making the time for us. Here's to hoping.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.